Will it be a step forward or a step back for Nebraska's offensive line in 2025? We discuss next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and we are on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us in this episode for the Armada Team of the Week later on.
All right, welcome in. It is Tuesday, Locked On Nebraska podcast. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer is looking at me. He's from 1620 The Zone, looking at me. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm in some kind of a weird background here in Arizona, or I've got a weird background behind me. I'm in a hotel lobby. I don't know. Connor, can you hear the waterfall?
A little bit.
That's cascading.
There's definitely a water feature near you, which I think it's great. I think it adds to the ambiance. And like, we are now in a day and age where you could record a podcast in a hotel lobby. You could record a podcast in an airport. You could record a podcast in like a mall or something like that. And I don't think anybody really looks at you twice. That they're like, oh, that guy's just doing a podcast. So it's great.
Correct. Correct. There's people walking around. There's kids. There's families walking around. A nice lady in a green hat is just walking by me right now. It looks like I'm, doing a podcast, doing a radio show. They have no idea. They have no idea that I'm talking about Nebraska football here in the desert during spring break. On Monday, speaking of spring break, went to Surprise, Arizona, saw the Kansas City Royals play the Arizona Diamondbacks, saw Bobby Witt go 3 for 3, come within a triple of the cycle. The Royals just rolled the Diamondbacks. Seth Lugo through 5 innings, looked like he was in mid-season form.
Ooh,
I
like it.
We desperately need to somehow get the Locked On Royals podcast to allow us to be just like informal, like unofficial contributors to that. The host of that show, I believe his name is Jack Johnson.
Yeah, he does a good job.
He's yet to acknowledge me though. I think I've retweeted him a couple times. I think I've maybe quote tweeted him, and
one day at a time.
It's not happening. I don't think he quite understands the level of dedication.
Maybe they'll hit us. Maybe Jack will hit us up when another Jack gets to Omaha here in the coming weeks.
No doubt.
Maybe we could make ourselves useful when that happens.
Jack Caglione, the ex-Florida Gator. We missed him by 1 day in Major League Camp. He was I was also at a Royals game on Friday here in Arizona, but Jack was not there. It was a split squad day. He was up in Scottsdale while I was in Tempe. Jack was presumably in Surprise today, but not part of the big league club anymore. So we could see him in Omaha. I know all of you listening to this for Nebraska football content
definitely
care deeply about our talk. Yes. Alex Gordon, by the way, the former Nebraska Cornhusker, will be inducted this summer into the Kansas City Royals Hall of Fame. So that would be another reason for the aforementioned Jack Johnson to reach out, have a little crossover episode with Locked On Nebraska. We can talk about Gordo.
No kidding. You'd be a great expert on that too, covering those teams when they were dominant in the early 2000s. Like that, you'd be the perfect guy to talk to. So let's cut this and we'll put it out on Twitter and we'll see if anybody down there finds it.
We're going to tag Jack in this in the post having to do with this episode, and he's going to listen and wonder what we do on this show, because we're 4 minutes in and we're still talking about him and the Kansas City Royals.
All right now, people are listening to this. They're like, all right, come on, talk about Rocco Spindler. It's like, okay, we'll do it. Here we go.
Yeah. All right, the Nebraska football team is off until March 24th. That is Monday. So another 6 days of spring break. This comes after about 6 weeks of conditioning. The last 3 weeks were mat drills. From all indications that we got on social media over this previous weekend, they had team commitment week before heading out. I know you were excited about that, team commitment week.
Yes.
This is one of Matt Rule's staples that survived the cut of activities that have been eliminated here in 2025. This is the year of just getting down to business for Nebraska football. Like the superfluous stuff, like team commitment week, a lot of it is just getting thrown away, but they're still doing that, and they're still going to have spring practice, and we're still going to talk about it. And on Monday, we talked about Nebraska's offensive skill, kind of the good, bad, and ugly of Nebraska's offensive skill. If you didn't get that episode, check it out. Lots about the quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs. Today, we're going to hit the offensive line and the tight ends. So it's Nebraska's offensive size. Should we just go over who Nebraska returns first?
Yep.
What would you say? What are your initial, like, just without breaking it down, how do you feel about the Nebraska offensive line going into 2025?
Well, I like what they did in the transfer portal. Bringing in Rocco, who we've talked about plenty now on this podcast, and he will definitely come up in this show today. And getting a tackle in Elijah Pritchett, which is a good ad just because Nebraska needed it, and he was a starter at Alabama last year, regardless of how well he played. So they needed that to shore up depth, and those guys will likely be starters, and those guys will definitely be starters for Nebraska. And then, like, at the next most, or maybe this is the most important thing, I just think right away the injury concerns sort of jump out at you. Obviously, these guys don't need to be ready in March, but what does Turner Corcoran look like coming off of a long off season where he's hurt? What does Gunnar Gatula look like coming off of an off season where he's hurt? What does Teddy Prohaska look like coming off of multiple years now where he's been hurt? Are those guys dependable? So it's a line that has to absolutely come together in order for this thing to work, and they know it. There's no shortage of experience there, but it'll be interesting to see how the pieces fit together.
So I put this together: 12 returning linemen who could contend for spots on Nebraska's 2 deep in this upcoming year. So there's 10 spots on the 2 deep. You know that Pritchett and Spindler are getting spots. They're starters right now. So here's 12 coming back: Henry Lutovsky, guard; Gunnar Gatula, tackle; Justin Evans, guard or potentially center; Turner Corcoran, don't know where he fits as far as the position; Teddy Prohaska, tackle; Tyler Kanak, tackle; Grant Segrin, tackle; Sam Sledge, he's a center and a center only; Jason Machachak, he's a guard or perhaps a center; tackle Grant Bricks; guard Gibson Pyle; and guard Preston Taumua. Now the last 3 are redshirt freshmen, and this spring is going to be really big for them. So those are all, I think, promising players in the program, and there are 5 or 6 others in the program that could work their way into that conversation this spring. But I think those 12 are in the driver's seat as far as where they sit going into practice next Monday. And then, of course, you have to add Pritchett and Spindler, and Nebraska signed 4 freshmen in its 2025 recruiting class: Sean Hammerbeck, Juju Marks, Houston Kahina-Torres, and Brian Tepu. So there are 12 plus 2, 14, 24 offensive linemen on the Nebraska roster right now. They're not going to carry 24 offensive linemen among the 105 when the first game hits on August 28th. Probably, what would you say? 18 to 20,
yeah,
I think.
I was thinking even a little lower than that, but
could be 20 could be too high. It's almost 20% of the roster.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're a walk-on or a former walk-on, this is a big deal for you. Spring ball is a big deal for you, especially when there's going to be a bunch of holes with guys being out. I mentioned Prohaska, I mentioned Corcoran, I mentioned Gatula. There's also Lutovsky, who is hurt. Each of those guys has, game time experience, starting experience for Nebraska. I think when you look at it, you sort of pencil in Pritchett and Spindler, as you mentioned. And then the rest of it is super up for grabs. Justin Evans is going to be a guard or a center, I think, for Nebraska, depending on sort of how it works out with the others. And then outside of that, I mean, there's going to be a lot of open competition, I think, this spring. If Nebraska had to play a game this spring, it might not be great on the offensive line, but I suppose that doesn't matter much, when August rolls around.
So let's talk first, before we take our first break, about where Pritchett and Spindler are slotted on the O-line to begin. I think where they'll start next week, where they will begin practice next week. For me, Pritchett's the left tackle. I think if you sign a tackle out of Alabama who has the credentials that he has, and take his PFF grade with a grain of salt, some of that had to do with Alabama's offense and the quarterback that he was protecting and how mobile Alabama's quarterback was, and then it's a somewhat subjective grading system too. Now, I mean, not that he wasn't the best tackle in the SEC as far as pass protection goes, but you're still talking about a guy who started multiple years at Alabama, and if he was a real problem for the Tide at right tackle, they would have had somebody else in there who was better than him. They didn't have somebody who was better than him to play on the right side. So I think he's Nebraska's left tackle day one going into camp. And I think Spindler is Nebraska's right guard. That's where he played. Yeah, that's where he played at Notre Dame. That's where he's going to begin things in Lincoln.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think for sure Spindler is the right guard, given that was a position where, there's a lot of available bodies there, but now you got Spindler, who's a sure thing. So I think you slot him immediately in at right guard. I could be convinced that it's a good idea to have Pritchett over on the right side, just where he's been and where he's been comfortable. But I agree with you. I think he's Nebraska's best tackle option, and with your best tackle option, you move him over to the left side. That's the most important. I don't know if maybe it's not the most important out of the offensive line positions, but it's certainly the most valuable. And so you put him, as you mentioned, Nebraska went out and got him, and they paid a lot of money to get him. And so you put him in your most valuable position on the offensive line and let him go. So, and then you build off of that. But I agree with those guys being slotted in right away.
Let's take a break and come back and talk about that left tackle spot more, because if it's not Elijah Pritchett, then who would it possibly be? We'll give some of our ideas after this. A message right now from Nissan. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College Basketball experts, college basketball is in the spotlight this week, by the way. The experts are picking one team that stands apart, from top-seeded stars to unexpected upsets. These guys showcased the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. And this week, the Armada and clear-cut team of the week is the Florida Gators. Led by Walter Clayton's 17 points per game, Florida dominated the SEC tournament, winning each game by 9 points or more. And not only did Florida grab a number one seed, but it is the nation's most efficient offensive team to enter the NCAA tournament this week. It's clear that our team of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in an all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's new outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com.
And I want to tell you a little bit about Fabric, and I'll remind you that life moves fast, as if life isn't a constant reminder of that. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family, as Mitch and I can attest to. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they are off to college. Mitch could definitely attest to that one. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online, right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. You can get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day, so protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families, and apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Meet, MEET, fabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, welcome back. Segment number 2 here on a Tuesday. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you. Our weekly reminder to get your questions in for the mailbag episode, which is coming up on Friday as we go through our spring previews here on the week, talking about the bigs on Nebraska's offensive side of the ball. Okay, so you mentioned it before the break there, Elijah Pritchett. We had a little conversation about him. Both think he's slotted in at left tackle. If we walk out there the first day and there's an open practice and it's not Elijah Pritchett for some reason, maybe he is at right tackle, maybe he's not out there for whatever reason, who is it? Who would be Elijah Pritchett's backup today if the season started?
I can't even imagine a scenario where at the start of spring, Pritchett would be anywhere other than playing left tackle unless he was hurt. In the fall, you could look at perhaps Teddy Prohaska if he's healthy. You could look at Gunnar Gatula, who played that position last season with a good deal of success as a redshirt freshman. I think those players will end up manning the right tackle spot, again, provided that they get healthy. Both coming back from off-season surgeries that for Prohaska, it's another knee. It's happened twice. The ACL has happened to him twice. Yeah. Gatula's coming back from shoulder surgery, and he played at the end of the year with that injury, played in the Pinstripe Bowl with that injury, but needed to get it cleaned up. His is more his is not as much of a chronic thing. I think you can expect that Gunnar Gatula is going to be healthy 100%, ready to go when they get into the summer. Prohaska, of course, is much more of a crapshoot. And even if he gets healthy, you wonder, at his size, at his height, just as long as he is he cut out to be an offensive tackle in college football or an offensive lineman? Like, does he have the build to be able to do it? Can his body hold up to that? The answer so far in his career has been no. So we'll see. In the spring, there just isn't anybody else. Like, this is part of the reason that Nebraska can't put together a spring game, among other reasons. They don't have enough offensive tackles. You're talking about Grant Seagren, a walk-on. You're talking potentially about Grant Bricks, who is still in his first year. Well, now he's in his third semester of college, so he'll be a redshirt freshman in the fall. Tyler Kanak is a young guy who I think they like, but has yet to do it on the field. There are not a lot of answers there. So to me, that just hammers home the importance of getting Elijah Pritchett from Alabama, and two, the urgency to get him ready to play left tackle. Isn't the wild card in this entire offensive line discussion Turner Corcoran? And we know he's not going to be there for spring, not available for spring. Not once again, not a huge deal as long as you get him back for the season, although Nebraska would like to see how the puzzle pieces sort of fit together. But the dream has always been, with a talented Turner Corcoran, where do you put him? He's moved around so much in his career. He's done so many different things. He's been asked to do so many different things. He's been asked to be like the filler really throughout his entire career at this point. And he's stepped into, a lot of playing time throughout his Nebraska career. So like, ideally he could be a really good guard for you, but if they need him to step in at any point and be a tackle, it doesn't feel like they're that uncomfortable with doing that. Although we know it's probably not the best situation for the team and what they do. Injury that he had in 2024 was a hamstring, and it was a torn hamstring that required surgery. And he's had, a multitude of other ailments through his years at Nebraska. I don't look at him as the wild card so much as I look at him as a bonus. And if you have Turner Corcoran available in any kind of way in 2025, then that's a great boost to your offensive line. Like his experience, the leadership that he can provide, his presence out there on the field if he's one of your five, or even if he's a guy who comes in and plays 15 to 20 reps a game at whatever position, then he can be of great value. But I don't think you expect that if you're Nebraska. It would be a bonus to me at this point after all he's been through if he's ready to go.
Yeah. Maybe that's a better way to look at it. But if they feel like they can get something from him, and we won't know once again until the fall, definitely an added bonus. For Nebraska. So a lot of moving pieces on that offensive line. Is there any more thoughts before we kind of move on to the third segment and start talking about the tight ends here?
Well, I want to talk about the center. I think we believe that Evans is going to be a guard. We talked about Spindler at right guard, so that probably means Evans is your left guard on day one of spring if he's not the center. But Evans could play center. Do they feel like Sam Sledge is ready in his third year now in the program? He's the same class as Gatula, who stepped up last year, and then Machechak has been around for a bit too. And I think they like him and his physicality and the potential that he has
a lot. He gets talked about a lot by rules, so we're kind of waiting for that one to pop a little bit there, I think. And he started as a defensive lineman, right? So that's a change.
That to me is if there's a wild card on the offensive line, it's the center spot. And if Nebraska can craft, and this is Donovan Raiola's specialty, like if there's one position that he knows best, it's the center, and he did a nice job with Ben Scott over the last couple of years. If they can build a Big Ten center out of Sam Sledge or Jason Machechak and allow Justin Evans and of course not need to call on Rocco Spindler to go over and play center.
Yep.
Which I don't think is likely. That's like if a bunch of players get hurt. But if Evans doesn't have to do it, then that to me is kind of the wild card here on the offensive line. Like get one of those guys ready, and even like an outside shot. After I just got done saying it's any kind of a bonus if you get him. Like what if Turner Corcoran could play center? What if he comes back and you can make him into a center? I think that's very unlikely with his availability during the offseason, but it's not totally out of the question. I think it's something that's been considered in the past. That it's probably the biggest question about this offensive line is who's going to fit at the center. And if it's someone other than Justin Evans, then he can play left guard, and that kind of brings all the pieces together and solidifies the starting five.
Yeah, you just don't want to go too deep. If we're asking questions about Segrin and a couple of the reserve guards, which we will be in spring ball because they'll be out there a lot. That probably doesn't mean that some of the top guys have come into fruition the way that they wanted them to.
Bricks also deserves some mention here because of what a high level recruit he was, and the big gap that he had to make up with just his understanding and the size that he needed to add, understanding of this level of football.
Yep.
I think I said a few months ago incorrectly that he played 8-man football in Western Iowa. It was 11-man football, but it was a small class football in the state of Iowa. Yeah. And he wasn't, but he's highly regarded in the program. And at some point they're going to rely on him, presumably at tackle, but it could even be at guard this year if that's needed, say, because Justin Evans has to go over and play center.
All right. When we come back, tight ends, what does a year for Heinrich Haarberg, the tight end, look like this year? We'll get to that when we wrap things up next.
All right, a message here from a new sponsor of the Locked On Nebraska podcast, Upwork. If you are scaling your business, you know that it requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. So visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right. Welcome back. Segment number 3 on this Tuesday of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone in Omaha is with me. We finished up with the offensive line, and we're going to move over to the tight end position. This will be it for the offense in our spring preview this week. We got to the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and the running backs in Monday's show. A reminder for Friday, if you have questions for us in the mailbag, if you dig out from the massive snowstorm that's expected to hit Omaha this week. I don't know what this is about. I'm in Arizona right now, and I'm thinking about just not coming back. Like, can I just delay this until like April?
Here's the other thing. Like, it was beautiful on Monday. It's beautiful, going to be beautiful on Tuesday. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. We're going to get this weird flash blizzard thing, and then maybe it'll be over. I don't know. Maybe we're willing to deal with it just because it feels like it's the last one, but it's nonsense. That's all I got to say.
I'm supposed to fly back during the blizzard, so not excited about that at all. Maybe we'll be trying to move that to another hour of the day, another day. Who knows? I should make it back by Monday when Nebraska opens spring practice in Lincoln. It should feel like spring again. I think this whatever happens, it's going to melt, and they're going to be out there. On the Matt Rule would like it if he started spring practice and they were trudging through the snow on the turf out there, or the grass and the turf out there next to the Osborne Legacy Complex. I don't know. I'm kind of done with blizzards. Let's talk about the tight ends. So Nebraska loses Thomas Fidone. It returns Luke Lindenmeyer. It returns Heinrich Haarberg, who's now a tight end and played that position in the lead up to the Pinstripe Bowl and during the Pinstripe Bowl. It returns Carter Nelson, who's coming off of hip surgery in the offseason. And then there's Mac Markway, the LSU transfer, who I had to look this up, but and we never got to know Mac Markway in the 2024 season because he showed up and knocked on the door and came in and introduced himself to Matt Rule, and then like a week later he tore his ACL when he was getting ready to play in his first Nebraska game. He was like a Fidone level recruit. And you know, it doesn't come as a shock because he was at LSU, but kid out of St. Louis, ton of upside. Interesting to hear maybe more when he gets healthy, like what that upside is. He caught a touchdown pass as a true freshman for the Tigers in the SEC, but I don't know if they view him more as someone who can be like a dominant run game force, like a blocking tight end, or if he's like a big time receiving threat. That'll be interesting to find out. But he's definitely a name to not forget in that tight end discussion.
Yeah, well, and they lose Borkircher too.
Yes, forgot about that.
One of
Texas
the more
transfer.
Yeah, one of the more disappointing or puzzling departures, I guess, of the offseason. For Nebraska, who I mean, really could have used that guy this year with the questions at the position. So, you're not going to have Carter Nelson in the spring, who he's been out wide for the majority of his career so far, but you're looking to sort of, find a way to, put more weight on him and get him probably a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage or not. We'll see what happens coming off of this surgery now for him, but that's not until after the spring. So it's Haarberg. He's going to get a lot of reps at that position. And Markway was another guy who's not going to be available.
No, because he's still rehabbing from the ACL. Yeah.
Right. So a lot kind of going on at that position. We're going to talk about injuries and not knowing really what it's going to look like. I mean, we're going to get a really good look at Heinrich Haarberg at that spot. And then outside of that, you got guys like Caden Echternock and Eric Ingwerson and Ian Flint. And there's a reason probably why you've never heard of those guys. Little little bit further down in the depth chart and young, right? So they'll get opportunities this spring.
First and second year players. Danny King's another tight end, and they're thin. They're thin at tight end. Like, I don't see this being a position where Nebraska has to or can cut much fat as far as where it's at on the 105. Like, you're probably looking at 7 tight ends, I would think, 6 to 7 tight ends on that 105, and they're not far off from that right now. Lindenmeyer, I'm intrigued by him and just what the development is with another year in the program. We remember the Illinois game when Luke Lindenmeyer flashed open, not covered by Illinois. Nebraska should have scored a touchdown to all but ice that game. Of course, there's a missed field goal and it goes to overtime, and that was a disaster. But Dylan Raiola just overthrew him, or perhaps Lindenmeyer didn't quite have the speed that was necessary to catch up to a ball that other tight ends in that offense catch. I think he came along quite a bit as the season progressed and turned into someone that the Dana Holgorsen coached offense fits well. So you give him 8 or 9 months to work in that system after the bowl game, and I think they're going to have a player who is a different looking individual than what you remember from most of 2024, like a legitimate Big Ten tight end to team up with Haarberg in the spring, and then presumably, hopefully, Nelson and Markway in the fall.
To your point, Mitch, I mean, the stats back that up for Lindenmeyer. He had 5 catches last year, and 4 of them were after Holgorsen took over as the offensive coordinator in the USC game, and he had 2 catches in the bowl game. This is after Borkircher departs, obviously. So I think there's some definite good stuff to build on there. And then, there's the Haarberg question. What's going to happen? We know he's an athletic freak, right? They have nothing but good things to say about him. He'll do whatever for the team. But how much can you depend on him in 2025 at that tight end position? It's a fascinating discussion.
Yeah, I mean, he's a work in progress. I mean, you can't expect him to go out there and he's not going to look like an All-American. I think he's going to flash his athleticism, but you're probably going to have to rely on him in spots. I don't know that it would be quite a feat for Marcus Satterfield, Nebraska's tight ends coach, if he can get Heinrich Haarberg ready to play 40 or 50 snaps a game and understand and know the tight end position. Like, he's somebody I feel who's going to realize his potential at that position, potentially post Nebraska. Like, I think he can be an NFL tight end, but he's not going to necessarily play every down and look like an NFL tight end in his time that remains in Lincoln.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that, but I don't know. He's flashed as an athlete several times. Obviously, most of that at quarterback. You go back to the Minnesota game a couple years ago at the start, the very first game in the rule era, when he had the catch and like, wow, okay, what's going on here? So there's just little sort of nuggets of that. But he'll be like a go-to guy in the spring, whatever that means.
Yeah, I'll finish with this thought about the tight end position. I think in the rev share world, in the Pat Stewart era of Nebraska football roster construction, they want tight ends to be a premium position. Like, they want to be able to recruit tight ends and get tight ends out of the transfer portal that they can spend big dollars on. Like, this is not bargain basement position. They believe that they can get big time production out of tight ends in Holgorsen's offense, even though throughout good chunks of his career he's been a guy who hasn't featured the tight ends as much because he's been playing in the Big 12 where it's all spread. But I based on what Dana did with Lindenmeyer and with Borkircher and a little bit with Fedoni in the bowl game, I envision Nebraska's vision for the tight ends to be a big one.
I'll tell you what, Nebraska fans have been dying for that for years. Mm-hmm. How many tight ends have we been like, oh man, this guy could open up the whole offense? We've said that, year after year after year after year. So maybe even in a year where you're not sure about the personnel at the position, Dana Holgerson could bring that to life a little bit. Certainly one to watch coming up in the spring. Okay. That's it for us today. And that's it for the offense. Appreciate you making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. For your second listen, you can check out Locked On College Basketball. Isaac and Andy will get you ready for the tournament. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.